Here she sits in this cold little bland room across two lead investigators, in tears and in serious denial of how on earth she could have ended up in this mess. Well, I know how. The way I see it is there are four main reasons to lie. First is to spare feelings. No, honey, you look great in that dress. Second is to calm fear. This isn't going to hurt one bit. The third is to get out of trouble. It was like that when I found it, I promise. And finally, we lie for attention. My girlfriend's a supermodel. You can't meet her though because she's out of the country on a photo shoot. But it's this last one I'm going to focus on. Her name? Sherri. She began lying as a small child and never seemed to stop. She lied about the way she is treated by others. She lied about who she was dating. She lied about injuries. She lied about her talents. Sherri was a big fat liar. In school, she blogged about how she was attacked and beat down by some Mexican girls. But don't worry, because Sherri was able to fight back. After all, she wasn't going to let anyone push her around for being young, beautiful, petite, and blonde. These are her words, not mine. And get this. She was at a party one night playing a game with her friends, and she accidentally swung her controller and hit herself in the face. And how does she explain her black eye the next day? Her boyfriend did it. They got in an argument and he hit her. That's right, he gave it to her. But the problem with this was she got so comfortable telling this lie that she started telling it to her friends who were actually at the party and saw her do it. And when her lies started catching up with her, or if she didn't get the attention she thought she should be getting, she would pull out the big guns. I have a tumor in my brain. Yeah, it's true. I exaggerate and I embellish these stories, but I kid you not. She said she had a brain tumor. So let's fast forward, shall we? She's all grown up now, has a husband and kids and everything. And for whatever reason, Sherri was seriously craving a heap of attention. So just sit back and let me tell you how Sherri ended up in the room with these two agents. James. Hockey-playing, burly, manly man James opened his email to find a message from an old flame of his, Sherri. The email goes on to say how she never really got over him and how she often daydreams about how it would be if she never broke it off. Well, big old lovable James just lit right up. He had never forgotten about Sherri. They started to talk, and as time went by, he started learning how that poor girl was stuck in such a horrible relationship, getting verbally and physically abused on a daily basis. Oh, but if it wasn't for her kids, she'd be so out of there, maybe even starting a new life with him. But unfortunately, there was no way for her to leave her husband Keith. He was close friends with all the cops, and he made it clear he would say whatever it took to make sure that if she ever left him, she would regret it, and that would include losing her kids. After some time, a couple of burner phones, a handwritten letter, and some encouraging words from Sherri, James was on his way. 12 hours. 12 straight hours in a rented van. James pulled up to where Sherri said she'd be waiting. But before he pulled up, she would remove her earbuds, a locket of her hair, and place them on the ground with her cell phone. She would have to leave something behind for Keith to find. I mean, come on, what's the point of being kidnapped unless someone knows you've gotten kidnapped? So after coming home and finding his wife wasn't there, he also discovered that their kids were still sitting in daycare. So then he tracked her phone just to find it on the side of the road with her hair. A 911 call was made. The cops showed up, a search ensued, and then the real fun began. Poor Keith. Not only was he mortified that his beloved wife was missing at this point for a week, he also found himself in the crosshair of the police. After all, he is the spouse. Meanwhile, in this week's time, let's get back to Sherri. She was committed. I mean, she went all in. If there's anything that she learned throughout the years, it's that if you're going to lie, you need to mix in as many truths as you can. This is how you really sell it. It's how you keep things straight in your head. She closed herself off in the guest bedroom, had James board the window, chained herself to the closet, zip-tied her hands to see how hard it would be for her to bust out of them, had a bucket in the room so she could, well, it was filled with kitty litter. Like I said, she was committed. She even ate as little as she possibly could. But are you ready for the fun part? She told James to go to the store and pick up a wood burning set. She laid it on the table and had him brand her. Keep in mind, our friend James is not the sharpest tool in the shed. Everything he was doing was because she said it was the only way for her to get out of this relationship, and hopefully they could end up together. For example, shooting pucks off of her legs to leave bruises, hitting the end of a hockey stick while she held the other end to her nose, letting her sit in a pitch black room for days at a time. These were, so he thought, for her to have a way to show the cops she ran away from Keith because he was beating her. As for the branding, as well as losing so much weight, and she also chopped off her long blonde hair. Those were just personal things that Sherri wanted to do for herself and really had nothing to do with the plan. So you can imagine James's surprise when out of the blue on Thanksgiving Day, after a second week of being at his home, she said to him, "Yeah, I'm ready to go home." So in the rented van, they both went, Sherri laying in the back seat and not saying one word to James the entire way. When almost there, she told him to pull over. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say goodbye. She just jumped out and disappeared into the night, where she would attach a chain around her waist and wire tie her hands. Oh, how Keith was ecstatic to get that call from the police saying they found her. So he was getting grilled for 2 weeks straight while caring for their 2 kids alone, taking lie detector tests, being accused for her disappearance. She's finally home. Yay. Horrified, beaten, and bruised, crying out for her one true love, Keith. "They took me, Keith. They took me. It was 2 Mexican girls. They had a gun. It was awful. They burnt me. They chopped off my hair. I had to use bucket go pee-pee." No one could spin a tale like Sherri. Poor kidnapped Sherri, who had now become a town hero. With the search, news broadcasts, interviews, helicopters, dogs, manpower, over $200,000 was spent to find this girl. And then out the blue, here she is. And James, his face must have dropped when he saw her on the news, hugging and clinging on to her husband, saying all she wanted to do was escape so she could be with him again. Wow, Sherri. But those Shasta County cops, those are some smart cookies. Something just wasn't adding up with her story. She was giving a lot of details, but I don't know, things she should have known she didn't. And then the things that seemed unimportant, she remembered. For example, the kidnappers listened to a lot of mariachi music. The cops knew she was full of it, but they just couldn't prove it. She lied to them and everyone else, wasted their money, wasted their time, and now here she was being labeled a hero. But then it happened. 4 years later. That's right, 4 years later. Never giving up, and with help of DNA and some Facebook photos, they found James. He tried to play dumb, but he finally cracked, telling them everything. And Sherri, in all her attention to detail, seemed to have described everything that was in his house. Where she was branded, the boarded window, described the kitchen floor and the crack in the bathroom wall. And James, he was apparently so shocked with how abruptly she left, he forgot to pull the chain out of his closet. So there it was, right where she left it. They finally got her. They called her to the station saying they had a new lead. So her and Keith came right on in. But once there, slowly but surely, the cops started to poke and prod at her story. And then they pulled out the photos. "Hey, what's this? A boarded window? Oh, and looky here. It's a chain in the closet and a crack in the bathroom wall. And what's this? The table you described where you were branded." One by one, they showed her everything she described to a T. Then they told her about the DNA that led them to James, and how he told them everything, and how he passed a lie detector test. This miraculous moment was so spectacular that Keith, her one true supporter, faced with all this evidence against her, actually got up and walked out the room. Sherri's mind must have been racing. She was probably experiencing those cold chills you get when you're caught red-handed. And the cops, they knew they didn't have much on her. After all, it isn't a crime to run away, and it's not a crime to hit and burn yourself. It's not even a crime to lie. But it is a crime to lie to a federal officer, and that's exactly why he was in that room, to see if she would lie when it mattered the most. "Sherri, we have your DNA. We have James's DNA. We have his polygraph results. We have eyewitnesses putting you at his house. We have the burner phones. We have your handwritten letters telling him to come get you, the rental van receipts, and all the details you gave. If you tell us right now that you made this whole thing up, no crime has been committed. You can go home and try to patch things up with your husband and move on with your life. Or you can continue to deny the hard facts and lie, and you will face serious penalties. Yeah, Sherri knew she was busted. She stopped crying and slowly lifted her face from her hands. She looked right at the officers. "Well," he said, "what's it gonna be?" Sherri was sentenced to 18 months in prison, as well as fined $300,000 in retribution. Keith divorced her and took the kids.